Welcome to Business Today Television. We are live from our studios of the India Today Group at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and with me, the chairman of the board of directors of PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Bob Moritz. Bob, welcome to the show. You're starting our day 2 coverage, and it's nice and chilly here, and the sun is still some minutes away. Bob, but as the sun rises, your latest survey, which is around 4,400 global CEOs, has a very interesting take. From record optimism to record pessimism is the mood of global CEOs as captured by this survey, which has been literally released just a few hours back. Bob, tell us about the key takeaways.
The key takeaway is 73% of the CEOs are pessimistic about the global economy and its ability to grow next year. Let's put that into context. As you said, that is a record level of pessimism. And the last time we had this was back in 2008 and 2009 during the financial crisis. Now, I will say it's coming off, first, a relative comparison compared to last year. So it's not a surprise that that pessimism exists today when you look at the macroeconomic factors. Inflation, rising interest rates, and the volatility and uncertainty that rests in the marketplace consistently around the globe right now. Because that pessimism is fairly consistent around the world on the economy, as well as across multiple sectors. The interesting thing is geopolitics is now equally playing a part of that concern. And it's well beyond the China-US stuff that we've talked about previously. It's going to what's happening in the Middle East. It's going to what's happening in the EU. And can we actually move forward and hold strong relevant to how they're actually dealing with the war, energy pricing, and the like. So there's a lot of pessimism in the system. The question on the table is, have CEOs gone too far last year on the optimism and maybe too far on the pessimism this year? And the question is how to manage our way through it. And that's the big aha for us as we look
We'll
forward.
take that big aha. But you spoke about 2008. Would it be fair if some people were to assume after reading this survey that you are saying that it's a return of 2008?
No, the difference this time around is back in 2008, first, it was caused by a shock to the system that no one saw coming. In this case, all of these factors that have driven the concern, we've seen. It's been building. It's been a boiling pot, so to speak, in terms of the issues. It's the magnitude of the issues. It's the combination and the amplification of these issues and the economic implications. The second difference from 2008 and 2009, the amount of confidence CEOs had in their ability to grow revenues in 2008 and 2009 fell down dramatically, consistent with their view on the economy. This time, it's fallen. So they don't think they'll be able to grow as much their own revenues, but much less than ever before. Let's remember the CEOs went through COVID. There is a lot of muscle memory in terms of, okay, how do I change and direct the ship during really uncertain times? We continue to have them. In the past, it was solely COVID. Now it's a combination of other things.
There's another interesting point that this survey reveals, which is that 40% of the CEOs surveyed believe that their organizations won't survive in 10 years unless they transform. What does this really mean?
So the challenges that the world are seeing, when you add them all together, equate to significant disruptions to their economic and operating models right now. And that 40% where they are worried that they will not be economically viable over the next decade unless there's significant transformation is consistent across all sectors. So this is not a financial services issue or a healthcare issue.
So it's not sorry to interrupt you, but it's not a trend issue. It's not like technology making a certain way of business process obsolete.
This is a systemic issue of how do you manage change in a big-time way.
Now, why did it happen, Bob?
Well, you've got a couple of different reasons, and let me bring them to life with some examples, because that 40% actually varies quite a bit around the world.
Absolutely.
In China, that number is close to 70%. In Japan, that number is close to 70%, but for two radically different reasons. In China, it's driven by, over the next 10 years, they know they're going to have to actually pay significantly different to attract and gain energy. It's going to move away from coal in that country, as we know, as you look at some of the climate implications, and they're going to have to pay top dollar for that. It'll have implications to their business, their margins, their P&Ls, and likewise. In Japan, it's actually how will consumers consume. It's a big challenge. In Brazil, it's a record low. It's in the 20s. Now, that part of the world has not been affected by technology very much. They're seeing the biggest reason for that change. Technology change is coming there, very similar to what we've seen in India, in China, in the U.S., and other places
What's the sort of sub-trend in India? While we
the sub-trend in India is actually twofold. One is consumers, in terms of how do they consume products and services, especially as India as a country brings that manufacturing and balances it with the services industry. And the second issue is how, in fact, the technology will implicate how the businesses now manage.
Okay.
They have to manage themselves, not providing technology to the world, which is what they do very well, but how they manage themselves with technology in mind.
We'll come back to the India point because I want to wrap up the global sort of mood first. And coming back to the 2008 versus 2022-23 mood, one key point, interest rates. Again, this was mentioned by you earlier. The era of ultra-low interest rates ending. What kind of implications will it have for capital raising and for even entrepreneurship and the startup culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. What we see is sort of three primary effects of this. First, you're going to have a number of companies that will fail. We're finally going to go through a period where you're going to see bankruptcies, the zombie companies, so to speak, that have been able to ride the wave and have free money or benefit from zero interest rates. Candidly, going to struggle.
This is global phenomenon?
A global phenomenon around the world.
Okay.
The second thing is going to be that most organizations have now increased the amount of debt over the last couple of years that they picked on. They've restructured and they brought that debt at a very cheap level. In fact, if they've got to reset the interest rates, they're going to have to figure out ways to reduce that debt. So you are going to see some restructurings now as well, in addition to dealing with bankruptcy issues. The last point is, how do I save money, i.e. take cost out of the system, to pay for that increasing debt issue? And one of the ways they're thinking about doing that is, how do I extract value by the M&A deal? So you're going to see a lot of trimming of portfolios and changing of portfolios. I'll sell a business to create some value, pay some debt down, or I'm going to actually take a risk and maybe take on some debt, knowing it's got increasing interest rates, to maybe be advantageous to the opportunities that's in front of me. Maybe my competitors are a little bit risk averse in terms of making that acquisition.
Will this impact emerging market economies like India, where we've seen a massive startup boom, and also headlines which say funding winter is upon us?
Yeah, so I think the emerging markets, I think you have to separate what's happening in, for example, Africa versus India, because I think there's a big difference in terms of the implications. In Africa, the growth isn't there yet, right? As you think about GDP, in India, you've got a significant baked-in amount of growth when you look at the rise of the consumer, the rise of the middle class, and the like. And candidly, India should be expecting 6-7 percentage points on the GDP side, which actually will help absorb those rising interest rates and maybe even fuel it in one way, shape, or form. We'll have to be smart about how we actually deploy that debt. In Africa, we're still at zero growth from a GDP perspective. And yes, there's an economic implication to that. So it's going to be hard to absorb those rising interest rates. So there's a nuance across the emerging markets that we got to focus on.
I'm going to now focus on India because our audience in India would value what you have to say about the first point. What's the survey capturing in terms of the mood of Indian CEOs specifically?
Yeah, India's CEOs are, yes, equally pessimistic on the global economy, much more optimistic about the local economy, and much more optimistic about their ability to raise revenues across the world as well, irrespective of whether they're domestic or more global in nature. And that comes back to what you see happening in India. This is a big opportunity right now in terms of, can India take advantage of the situation they see in front of us? One of the things that organizations have said in reaction to this pessimism is, I'm going to cut costs, but I'm going to continue to focus on keeping my headcount. That's good, and that's an opportunity for India, because India continues to be an asset and a deployment of capital, human capital, to the world, as you think about some of the stuff that happens there. The second thing that's interesting is organizations are re-looking at supply chains to be more effective and efficient. I think the opportunity for India here is, you've got an opportunity that where the world relied on perhaps China a lot. It's not China plus one, it's China plus many now. India has an opportunity to supply the world with goods and services cheaply, good quality, great labor to support it, back it up, resiliency and security, as well as, if India can actually play bigger in greener supply chains, less carbon intensive, that'll be beneficial to it, and the world will come its way as well.
Where does India stand in the others? Because last year, right here at this venue, we were speaking about China plus one. That could just be the Indian perspective. But within the others, where does India stand?
Yeah, India is seen as very opportunistic in terms of opportunities for organizations to think about India as they think about investment and particularly around the supply chain side of the equation. India as a country, in terms of where you're investing for new business, hasn't risen in the relative rankings right now. It's always been the hope and promise that India will get there. I would say there's three things that are driving the concerns about India, of what's holding it back. One is the stability of its growth, because we see a lot more volatility, so can the growth be sustained? Second is, can we make it easier to do business in India? India, both at the federal level, countrywide level, and the state level, continues to rise in that regard, and candidly other organizations are seeing that, which is great, but more work to be done. And last but not least, infrastructure around the country in terms of ease of logistics and getting around, etc., is another thing the country needs to focus on. My big message to India would be, if you can bring climate and greener into all that you're doing, I think the world's going to see you even as a bigger opportunity to want to invest.
One quick message to Indian CEOs, especially those who have outward-facing businesses, not just in IT, but even other sectors.
Yeah, the piece of advice I would say is, you have done a great job over the last couple of years moving with speed and scaling up your operations. You've got to sell that and market that more so to the world. In the recent visit, I was just in India back in December, saw a lot of different companies that we serve in one way, shape, or form, and I'm amazed by the changes that have happened in the last couple of years. The world needs to know more about that, and the world needs to be incented to come to India, and see what can be done on the ground, and scaling up and dealing with some of the challenges ahead.
Bob, as we wind down this conversation, I want you to look ahead and forecast what are the key trends that you see shaping global business, not just from a technology perspective, but the new thing, AI or digital. And there are some people, some CEOs who say they haven't seen digital provide them the returns vis-a-vis the investments they have had to make. So just look ahead for us.
So the challenge looking ahead is all organizations are investing in new technologies to automate and centralize businesses. Let me come back. That's an opportunity for India, especially when you look at centers of excellence, delivery centers, call centers, and other aspects like that where process is housed in India. And the more you can bring AI and automate those processes, standardize those processes, and using data, big data, the better off I think India will be. The second is, we've got to remember to bring the human capital along for the ride. And I'm a little worried that we're missing that. It's interesting, the attrition rates that we've dealt with in the Great Resignation over the last couple of years, people assume we're going to go away in a slowing economy.
But
it's not. For those with skills, you're going to still have those same issues. And in fact, 70% of the CEOs believe attrition for those with skills is going to remain the same. So we're going to deal with, some people call it the Great Resignation. They didn't resign from the workforce as much, some did, but it's a great reshuffle because there's no friction cost in talent moving. So talent's going to continue to be mobile. That's going to continue. So how do you empower the people to leverage technology better? So skilling your people to get the effectiveness and efficiency and not make it technology or human capital, but the combination of the two, really, really important. And last but not least is how management teams lead the way. Trusted leadership is needed now, and embedded in that is setting the tone, be willing to take some risks, be fast and agile. So having the right technology to give you the right data to make faster decisions, hugely important. Take the time and the friction out of your system to be really fast to the market.
I thought you said when you released the survey that great teams will win in the years ahead.
Without a doubt, and we do see a differentiation between the winners and losers over the next 5 to 10 years, all based on the quality of the management teams, their ability to make quick decisions, react, control what they can. Everything else is not controllable. Be ready to react to it and take advantage of it.
Bob, a final question. A lot of people back home look at Indian CEOs or people of Indian origin CEOs of global companies, and many of them ask, how do they make it? I want to get you to tell our viewers, what do you see in those companies choosing great guys of Indian descent? Is it what dictates that choice?
The dictating of that choice is, as you look at leaders for organizations, no matter what sector you may be in or no matter what part of the world you may be in, it's a paradox of leadership. So you need people today that, yes, can be strategic, but can go really deep and operationalize the strategic decisions. You got to be able to do both. You need the humble heroes, somebody that has got less ego and be willing to listen and engage with your workforce and your stakeholders, but then stand up to the pressures and take the tough decisions. You need to be able to think about how do I actually transform my organization and not just talk about it, but actually get it done. So the skill sets that CEOs need nowadays are a combination of skills that it's not just sit in the corner office anymore. It's go deep when you need to, get engaged as necessary, and be that humble hero to the world to bring and deliver the value to your stakeholders. Your
so not just a maths genius.
Yeah, absolutely right. So it's not just the IQ, it's the EQ as well as the global acumen that's going to be needed. And when we think about skill sets for the C-suite, a global acumen, understanding the world more so, definitely an ESG-like acumen, and the digital acumen to drive the change. And the last thing I'm going to say is you have to be the agent of change. You have to change the world, and you got to change your own organization to survive going forward, and those are the ones that are going to win.
Transform yourself and transform the company that you're working for. Bob, exactly. I enjoyed that conversation very much. Thanks. Thank you very much for your time. That was the chairman of PwC Global and telling us about the latest survey and the mood of global CEOs. If you've been, thank you very much for watching.